El Junquito Ride. Oscar Perez was a police officer who turned against Maduro's government. On June 27, 2017, he stole a police helicopter, flew it over Caracas, and attacked the Supreme Court building with grenades while dropping papers that called for people to rise up. Nobody died in the attack, but it embarrassed Maduro badly. Perez disappeared and spent 6 months hiding while posting videos online. Maduro wanted him dead. On January 15, 2018, they found him. Early in the morning, around 4:30 a.m., hundreds of agents and soldiers surrounded a house in El Junquito in the mountains west of Caracas. Perez and 6 other men were inside. The security forces brought everything: armored trucks, helicopters, even anti-tank weapons. They just started shooting at the house without warning. Windows shattered. Bullets punched through the walls. Perez and his men shot back, but they were trapped and completely outnumbered. Around 6 o'clock in the morning, Perez started posting videos to Instagram Live from inside the house. You can see him hiding behind broken walls with smoke everywhere and constant gunfire in the background. He's bleeding from his face and arm. He's yelling into the camera that they want to give up, but the soldiers keep attacking. "We want to surrender, but they're throwing grenades at us," he shouts. One of his men appears in another video saying the same thing, also wounded and begging to surrender. At about 7:30 a.m., the videos stopped. Security forces rushed into what was left of the house. Forensic investigators and leaked police recordings later showed what really happened. All 7 men were shot in the head at close range after they stopped fighting. The government said they died in the battle, but the evidence proved they were executed after trying to surrender. Leaked audio showed that government death squads called colectivos coordinated with police to make sure nobody survived. Maduro displayed Perez's body on television like a trophy. OLP massacre. On July 15, 2015, President Maduro launched something called Operations for People's Liberation. It started as a supposed crime-fighting mission. It ended as a 2-year massacre. The raids always happened the same way. Around 4 or 5 in the morning, before sunrise, armored trucks would roll into poor neighborhoods. Helicopters would drop down low, circling above the streets. Then hundreds of men in black uniforms and skull masks would jump out, carrying assault rifles. They'd set up roadblocks at every corner so nobody could leave. Then they'd start kicking in doors, 3 officers per house, using battering rams when locks didn't break fast enough. Inside, families would wake up to guns in their faces. The officers would search for young men, teenagers mostly, anyone between 15 and 35 years old. They'd drag them outside into the street, force them to their knees, and zip-tie their hands behind their backs. Then the executions would start. Officers would stand behind the kneeling men, press pistols against the backs of their heads, and fire. Bodies would drop forward onto the pavement. Blood would pool in the dirt. But here's where it gets even worse. After killing someone, the officers would reach into bags they carried and pull out old revolvers or cheap knives. They'd place these weapons next to the dead bodies and take photographs. This made it look like there had been a fight, like the victims had been armed criminals who fought back. Evidence showed these planted guns had never been fired and had no fingerprints on them. Venezuela's government reported 5,995 deaths from these operations in 2016 alone, another 4,998 in 2017. The Attorney General tried to stop it, documenting over 500 executions, but the government kicked her out of the country. According to United Nations investigators, evidence indicates that Maduro personally ordered these killings. By the time the operation ended, between 8,000 and 18,000 people were dead, most of them poor, young, and completely unarmed. FAES massacre. When the world started paying attention to the OLP massacres, Maduro didn't stop killing people. He just changed the name of the unit doing it. In 2017, he created FAES, which stands for Special Action Forces. Their job was simple: keep killing, but do it quieter. FAES worked differently than the massive OLP raids. They didn't come in the morning with hundreds of soldiers and helicopters. They came at night, moving fast and silent through the neighborhoods. 3 or 4 black pickup trucks would pull up outside a house, lights off. 6 to 12 men in black masks and tactical gear would jump out carrying rifles. They'd smash through the door, grab whoever they came for, drag them outside, and shoot them in the street. Then they'd be gone, all in less than 3 minutes. One documented case from 2018 shows exactly how they operated. FAES units pulled up outside a house in Petare looking for a 19-year-old. His mother heard the trucks and ran to warn him. 6 masked men burst through the door, grabbed him by his hair, and dragged him down the stairs while his mother screamed and chased after them. In the street, they forced him to his knees. One officer stood behind him, pressed a gun to his head, and fired. The body dropped. The officers placed a revolver next to his hand, took a quick photo, and drove away. Start to finish, under 3 minutes. Venezuela's own government admitted FAES killed 5,287 people in 2018 alone. The United Nations found that FAES was responsible for 59% of all killings by security forces during this time. Investigators even found FAES training videos that literally told officers to kill criminals without compassion. The weapon planting from OLP operations had become standard procedure, with every FAES team carrying bags of untraceable guns to place next to bodies. Human Rights Watch called them Maduro's official extermination squad, and by 2019, that's exactly what they were, a government death squad operating openly in the streets. Sabin's torture murder program. While FAES killed people openly in the streets, two intelligence agencies were doing something worse behind closed doors. CBIN, the National Intelligence Service, and DGCIM, Military Intelligence, ran a network of torture facilities where people disappeared. The kidnappings always looked the same. 4 or 5 unmarked SUVs would pull up and block the street. 8 men in regular clothes would jump out, some carrying guns. They'd grab someone off the sidewalk, throw a black hood over their head, zip-tie their hands, and throw them in a vehicle. No arrest warrant, no explanation, no phone call to family. Just gone. Most prisoners ended up at a place called El Helicoide, a huge concrete building in Caracas that Sabin turned into their main torture center. Guards would drag prisoners down into basement rooms with flickering lights and concrete walls. They'd strip people naked, tie their hands to pipes above their heads, and leave them hanging until their shoulders dislocated from their own body weight. During questioning, they'd wrap plastic bags over prisoners' heads and hold them tight until the person passed out, then rip the bag off and do it again. Others were beaten with baseball bats wrapped in cloth so they wouldn't leave marks, or had electrical wires attached to their genitals, while officers cranked generators that sent electricity through their bodies. DGCIM ran their own torture centers targeting military officers they thought were disloyal. In June 2017, they arrested Navy Captain Rafael Acosta Arevalo. For days, they beat him with pipes, hung him by his wrists until his shoulders came out of their sockets, and electrocuted his testicles. When his lawyer finally saw him in court, he could barely walk and his body was covered in bruises. 2 days later, he was dead. The officer who tortured him got promoted. The United Nations documented at least 51 Sabin torture cases and 122 DGCIM cases. Former officials told investigators that President Maduro personally called the head of DGCIM to order arrests and torture. At least 4 people died from torture in these facilities, but those are just the documented cases. Election 2024. After Maduro claimed victory in the July 28, 2024 election that most people believe he lost, protests broke out everywhere. His response was immediate and brutal. Starting on July 30th, security forces launched what human rights groups call knock-knock raids, a wave of mass arrests that's still happening today. The raids always happened in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 in the morning. CBIN agents and police would surround apartment buildings and go door to door. 6 to 8 officers would pound on each door, shouting for people to open up. Families had maybe 10 seconds before officers used battering rams or just kicked the doors in. They'd storm inside with guns and flashlights, pull people out of their beds, and drag them into hallways. They grabbed opposition activists, but also their family members, including teenagers. Everyone got zip-tied and hooded before being thrown into vehicles. The prisoners disappeared into Venezuela's prison system. At places like Tocaron prison, guards forced new arrivals to strip naked and run through lines of inmates who beat them with pipes and clubs while guards watched. At Sabin facilities like El Helicoide, interrogators used plastic bags over heads until people passed out, electrical shocks to genitals, and something called the submarine, where they'd shove prisoners' heads into buckets of water mixed with human waste until they almost drowned, then pull them up and do it again. Human rights groups documented over 2,000 arrests in the first few weeks. Among them were 176 children, some as young as 14 years old. Torture cases jumped to 2,224 documented victims in 2024, an 88% increase from the year before. Right now, in January 2026, about 62 people are still missing. Nobody knows where they are. Another 896 are locked up as political prisoners on fake terrorism charges. Of those 176 children who were arrested, all of them were tortured or sexually abused while in custody. Barlovento massacre. In October 2016, Venezuelan army soldiers from a unit called Batallón Caribe del Ejército came to Barlovento, a small town about 2 hours from Caracas. They said they were there to fight crime, but what they did was murder people. The soldiers set up checkpoints all over town and started grabbing young men off the streets. Over about a week, they arrested 35 guys, mostly fishermen and workers, none older than 30. They loaded them onto military trucks and drove them to an army base. That's where the torture started. Soldiers beat them with helmets and fists, smashing metal against their heads until blood ran everywhere, kicking their ribs until bones broke. This went on for hours. Then they separated about 12 of the men from the group. They tied their hands with rope and put them back on the trucks. The vehicles drove up into the mountains on dirt roads that went deep into the forest until they reached a clearing where nobody could see or hear what was about to happen. The soldiers pulled out machetes from the truck beds, big, heavy blades used for cutting through brush. They forced the men to kneel in a line. Then they started hacking at them with the machetes. A forensic investigator named Zaire Mundere found the bodies weeks later. 10 men had been killed with machete wounds to the head and neck, their bodies thrown into mass graves. 2 more were shot in the back of the head. 5 others from the original group were never found and are still missing. The Wall Street Journal called it the most bloodthirsty of killings by security forces in Venezuela's crisis. The National Assembly held an emergency vote and unanimously condemned what the military did, which almost never happens. But nobody got in trouble. The soldiers responsible stayed in the army, and the families of the 5 missing men are still looking for them today.